They thought Earth was weak, insignificant, forgotten. But when the stars turned cold, humanity reminded them who we really are. Ciryath was dying. The once proud homeworld of the Venari, a species of hyper-intelligent insectoids, now echoed with the cries of failing hives and collapsing colonies. The sky was a dull, corrosive shade of amber, thick with spores. Wind swept across its jagged plains, carrying disease and despair. The Venari were logical beings. Every movement, every choice, calculated for efficiency. But their greatest strength now threatened their survival. The viral plague that had once brought them to the edge had mutated, adapting, learning. It was no longer just a biological threat. It was an enemy evolving faster than they could adapt. Hive mind protocols struggled to contain the spread. Resource management had become triage. The collective silence of falling colonies haunted their networks. They had developed cures, but the virus twisted around them like a serpent through a cage. Survival had become mathematical. The probability of extinction calculated down to decimal points. And yet, even with hope waning, there were whispers, dangerous whispers, whispers of contacting the humans. To the Venari, humans were chaos-given flesh. Elysiatar remembered vividly the last time they had opened their gates to Earth. The humans had arrived with smiles and promises. One mistake, an environmental oversight, led to a containment breach. A single lapse and dozens of colonies were lost. Elysiatar had survived that disaster. Her scars were invisible, woven into her logic. She had been one of the few to speak against the Alliance then. She remembered the looks of optimism, the praise for human innovation. Now, years later, the old fear stirred once again. Humanity thrived on emotion. They acted without consensus. They gambled. The Venari, in contrast, were the embodiment of structure. They did not weep. They did not rage. They analyzed, calculated, chose the most efficient path. To Elysiatar, humans were reckless invaders of order. But the plague was back, and the logic was cold. Survive or die. And still, she could not shake the memory of her fallen siblings. The council chambers pulsed with tension. Hive leaders buzzed softly in their thought waves, disagreements echoing in fragmented logic threads. Elysiatar stood tall, her bioluminescent carapace flickering with unease. "We must solve this internally," she said, her voice even. "Opening our gates again invites another disaster. Humanity brings entropy." Counselor Vistran countered, "Entropy, or survival? We may not like them, but humans survive anything." The room went still. No one could deny that. Earth had faced nuclear winters, AI rebellions, climate collapses, and lived, adapted, overcame. "They are adaptable because they are desperate," Elysiatar snapped. "Desperation is not a strategy." "Neither is extinction," Vistran replied calmly. A vote was called, not unanimous, not even close, but the outcome was undeniable. One human, one last chance. The human shuttle pierced Ciryath's sky like a defiant comet. Dr. Mason Rourke stepped out in a sealed exosuit, his eyes scanning the horizon through a haze of spore-laced fog. Tall, rugged, and unapologetically human, he walked with the air of someone who danced too close to death one too many times. His reputation preceded him. A maverick exobiologist known for saving extinct species by bending every rule. His presence was met with silence by the Venari, their compound eyes watching from shadowed ridges. Elysiatar met him first. "Dr. Rourke," she said, with the formality of a tribunal.
"Call me Mason," he replied, smiling under his visor. She hated him already. Rourke wasted no time. He asked the questions no Venari would dare, suggested gene alterations that defied protocol, proposed viral hosts from their sacred fauna. Every move clashed with their caution. And yet, the virus responded. In days, he slowed what their entire species had failed to halt in years. The question wasn't whether he was effective. It was whether they could survive how he achieved it. She watched him work. Unorthodox, unpredictable, human. Every success brought more discomfort. Each Venari cured under his methods felt like a piece of their identity lost. Elisitar felt a fracture forming within her. Duty clashed with pride. Logic warned her not to trust him. Emotion, the very thing she had trained to suppress, whispered something else. She saw him share a nutrient ration with a sick larva, saw him cry when a treatment failed, saw him curse himself in isolation chambers when mistakes were made. He felt, and for the first time, she wondered if that was a weakness or a strength. The virus was mutating again. Rourke would need her help, her expertise. Elisitar stood before the sterile chamber, torn between instinct and necessity. And for the first time in her life, she stepped forward, not as a strategist, but as an ally. And not for him, but for hope. Mason Rourke stepped off the ramp of his transport, boots clicking against the smooth, blackened stone of Venari Prime's capital colony. The air was sharp, metallic, and the sky a constant twilight hue beneath the dense, clouded atmosphere. He adjusted his breathing filter, feeling 100 eyes watching him. Venari citizens, tall and insectoid, stood in stiff clusters, their compound eyes never blinking, their antennae twitching with barely hidden distrust. He had expected caution, but not this ice-cold wall of animosity. Soldiers flanked him, silent but present. No words, no welcome, only the echo of suspicion. He forced a calm breath. He wasn't here to be liked. He was here to solve a crisis their best minds couldn't. But as he walked through the corridor of guards toward the grand domed hall, he couldn't shake the sense that every move he made would be judged. Their silence screamed louder than words. You do not belong. Elisitar stood on the raised dais, cloaked in armor etched with rank and history. Her gaze pierced Mason the moment he entered. You are not trusted. You are tolerated. Her voice was calm, but its precision cut deeper than anger ever could. I came to help, Mason replied. That remains to be seen. The room was heavy with tension. Venari officials lined the chamber, their stillness unnatural, like statues waiting to strike. Elisi's tone left no room for illusion. Humans were intruders. She questioned their impulse-driven nature, their tendency to gamble with chaos. Mason responded with control, though his heart raced. We may not think like you, but sometimes that's exactly what's needed. Or what destroys what's left of us. She didn't flinch. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a test. Mason had just entered the arena, and Elisi was the gatekeeper. In the sterile data lab, Mason pored over alien code and bio readings. The virus, silent, smart, lethal, had spread through Venari systems without triggering any alarms. That didn't sit right with him. Show me the signal traces, he whispered. Hours passed. Patterns emerged. Then he froze. There it was, a sequence. Subtle, almost beautiful in its mimicry. The virus wasn't just hiding in systems. It was imitating the neural communication of the Venari, seamlessly embedding itself in their bio-networks. Damn, he muttered. It explained the failures in their detection systems. The virus had evolved beyond biology. It had learned how to speak like them. He downloaded the logs. The implications were massive. He had proof.
proof that the Venari were fighting a ghost hiding in plain sight. And it changed everything. The room was silent. As Mason activated the projection, a hologram spun above the table, his proposed hybrid AI-human interface. It pulsed with unfamiliar code and glowing data trees. We built this, a neural AI that connects through my cognition. It reads the mimicry patterns in real time, something your tech can't do. Elise narrowed her eyes. You propose embedding your mind in our network? It's not invasive, it's adaptive. My mind reacts to irregularities your systems miss. I become the filter. Gasps, not a fear of offense. Your arrogance is noted, Elise snapped. You offer your mind as a solution? I offer a way to survive. He knew it was drastic, but drastic was all they had left. He showed the mimicry data, the projections, the dwindling time. We can wait and die in silence, or we act. But Elise's expression hardened. The line between savior and invader was razor thin, and Mason just stepped on it. Elise's rejection came swift and absolute. No, we will not pollute our systems with human chaos. Mason clenched his fists. It's not pollution, it's fusion. You asked for help. We asked for logic, not desperation. Her voice trembled, not with anger, but something colder. Fear, not of the virus, of him. To let you in is to lose what we are. Mason's mind raced. This wasn't about science, it was identity, trust, survival. You think I want to control you? You think I already do, she said, with every step you take. He stared at her. For the first time, he saw the wall wasn't built of arrogance. It was trauma, history, pain. But he also knew something else. There wouldn't be a second chance. Red lights blared. A hatchery, Sector K9, had gone silent. Mason was in the command center when the alert hit. He didn't wait. It's breached the youngling vault. Venari engineers froze in disbelief. Elise's voice broke the silence. Evacuate. Seal the chamber. No, Mason repeated. Not yet. He pulled up the network scans. He could see the virus. It was mimicking the younglings' neural patterns, suppressing their responses. They're still alive, hidden. No one moved. No one trusted. Time ticked. The future of a species hung in the balance. Mason ignored protocol. Armed only with his prototype, he slipped past the guards. The hatchery was cold. Rows of egg chambers flickered. Some were dark, some trembled. The virus was here, everywhere. His visor displayed pulses, neural mimicry layered like a shroud. He activated the interface. It linked to his mind instantly, painfully. Thoughts blurred. He became the sensor. There, he gasped. That clutch, Sector E5, still clean. He ran, disabling nodes manually. Each step lit the chamber brighter. The virus struck back. Systems surged, trying to crash his neural rig. But he pressed on. Every second risked infection. Every breath might be his last. But those lives were worth it. He did it. The clutch in E5 activated fully. The younglings pulsed with life. But his knees buckled. The rig overloaded. Mason? Elise's voice crackled through comms. He coughed. They're safe, but it got in. Silence. He looked down. His veins shimmered with bioluminescent threads. Infected. But he smiled. I'd do it again. The chamber lights turned green. Emergency systems purged the zone. He collapsed beside the younglings, hand resting on the shell of a newborn Venari. Elise arrived moments later. She saw his trembling body, his peaceful expression. You risked everything. For us. His voice was faint. That's what we do. And for the first time, her eyes shimmered, not with suspicion, but with something human. Respect. The air in the command chamber was cold, but not as cold as Elise's gaze. She stood tall, draped in the ceremonial robes of the Venari High Warden, but her trembling voice betrayed the fire beneath. You broke protocol. You accessed the hatchery without clearance. Do you have any idea what you've risked? Mason didn't flinch. His clothes were torn, stained with chemicals from the containment breach, and a deep bruise was forming along his jaw. Still, his eyes were steady. I did what needed to be done. You wouldn't listen. The virus, it's mutating faster than your models can track. Waiting for permission wasn't an option. Elise took a step forward, her voice like ice slicing through steel. You are not one of us. You don't understand what that place means. It's not just a lab, it's sacred. You risked everything we have left. I did what needed to be done. Something flickered in Elise's eyes. Not forgiveness, no, not yet, but doubt. For all her anger, something in Mason's recklessness mirrored her own long-buried fear that control was an illusion. You think you're the hero? You're just another human who thinks they know better. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. His actions had already spoken louder than her accusations. And for the first time, Elise wasn't sure who was right.
Mason staggered into the infirmary, sweat dripping from his skin like acid. The scans confirmed it. The virus had taken root. He stared at the display in silence, then clenched his fists. Good, he muttered under his breath. Tarvik, Elise's junior biologist, gasped. You're infected? And you're glad? Mason nodded grimly. Now I can test it from the inside. I've seen how the neural pathways shift. If I link with your tech, I might isolate the mutation. You're suggesting neural sync? Tarvik asked, horrified. No humans ever interface with Venari systems. I'm not asking for comfort, Mason said, stepping closer. I'm asking for a shot at saving lives. Let me be your lab rat. Tarvik hesitated. Mason's skin was already growing pale. His heartbeat was erratic. He didn't have days. He had hours, maybe. Still, Mason stood tall. I don't care what it costs me. If this virus wins, you all die. And I didn't crawl through fire and plague just to watch that happen. For the first time since he'd arrived, silence filled the room. Not resistance, not panic, just awe. Humanity was flawed, yes, but sometimes they moved when others froze. You're asking for the impossible, Elise said flatly, standing with her back to Mason. He had been brought to her chamber again, this time barely able to stand. His skin was clammy, his breath shallow, but his eyes still burned with resolve. I'm asking for a chance. That's all we've ever needed. Elise turned, her gaze stone hard. That chance means opening our most sacred neural core to a species that destroyed their own biosphere. You expect me to gamble our entire survival on a human? I'm already dying, Mason said. At least let it mean something. She paused, jaw clenched. The memory of her sister's last transmission haunted her, cut off mid-sentence. The ship lost because a human partner had overridden their safeties. No, she said coldly. We handle this the Venari way. No shortcuts, no outsiders. She turned and walked away. But long after Mason was escorted out, she remained at the edge of her platform, watching the stars, and wondering if she had just sealed their fate. Hours passed. Elise sat alone in the data chamber, replaying the hatchery footage. Mason had moved like someone who knew what to look for. His scans were erratic, human, yes, but effective. She ran the sequence again. Tarvik stepped in quietly. You're watching him again. I'm verifying patterns, she snapped, but her voice was hollow. Tarvik approached, his tone softer. He was right. The mutation's vector aligns with his predictions. He might not be Venari, but he sees what we miss. Elise hesitated. He's reckless. He doesn't understand restraint. He understands urgency, Tarvik countered. And sometimes that's what survival demands. She said nothing, but her shoulders slumped. The ghosts of her past, the ship, her sister, the silence, pressed heavy against her. Tarvik stepped closer. You're not wrong to fear him, but you're not the only one who's lost someone. Maybe it's time we stop deciding alone. Elise didn't answer, but when she rose, she took Mason's data crystal with her. For now, it was still a secret. The council hall erupted into chaos. He invaded the hatchery. He infected himself. He could be a weapon, one elder shouted, slamming his staff. And yet, No Vanari has offered a working theory. The virus is winning. Lines were drawn. Elders stood on opposing sides of the dome, arguing not just about Mason, but about survival, pride, and fear. Elise stood in the center, silent. This is what happens when we entertain aliens. Their ideas infect more than our bodies. They fracture our unity. But perhaps, another elder said softly, it is time for unity to be challenged. Eyes turned towards Elise. The decision was hers. She raised a hand. I did not authorize Mason's actions, and I did not approve his plan. Murmurs of agreement echoed. But I have reviewed his findings, and I cannot ignore that they make sense. Gasps, protests, silence. I will not act rashly, but neither will I bury truth because it comes from a human mouth. And just like that, the council stood divided, not by race or species, but by the unbearable weight of choice. That night, in the quiet chambers beneath the council hall, Elise sat with Tarvik by the glowing water. He reminds me of her, she whispered. Who? Tarvik asked. My sister. Tarvik stayed silent, letting her speak. She believed in human collaboration. She said we needed their instinct, raw, flawed, but alive. She died on a mission led by a human captain. He overrode her orders. The reactor failed. She clenched her fists. She died trying to protect him. Tarvik's eyes softened. And you've blamed all of them since. Wouldn't you? She asked, her voice breaking. He didn't answer. She wiped her eyes. But now I'm wondering, maybe he's not like the others. Maybe, Tarvik said, or maybe you've just found someone who reminds you what hope feels like. The alarms blared before dawn. Data feeds blinked red, vitals dropping, cities blacking out. In one cycle, over 10,000 Vanari were gone. The virus had changed, adapted. It no longer targeted clusters. It struck networks, minds, culture. Hospitals overflowed. Airships crashed. Family hives were silenced without warning. Elise watched the reports come in, her breath shallow. A tear slid down her cheek, unseen but felt. She turned to Tarvik. We've lost containment. He nodded grimly. We've lost time. The council chambers were empty now. No more debates, just death. And outside, Mason lay in quarantine, his body convulsing, still fighting, still hoping. Elise stood at the edge of the containment field. Mason was on the floor, shivering. The virus had nearly destroyed him. She stepped forward, voice trembling. We were wrong. His eyes flickered open. Took you long enough. She knelt beside him, her hands shaking. One chance. No promises, but try. Mason smiled, weak but defiant. That's all I ever asked for. And as the neural sync chamber lit with blue fire, Elise turned away, eyes wet, heart heavy. Not with fear, but with the weight of choosing hope. The room was dim, illuminated only by the soft blue glow of the hybrid rig. Cables pulsed with faint light, snaking like veins around Mason's body as he sat in the neural interface chair. Sweat slicked his brow. Elise stood nearby, her expression unreadable, her silver eyes fixed on the human about to risk everything. Mason inhaled sharply. Let's do this. The switch flipped. Instantly, his world exploded. Colors that had no name surged across his vision. Soundless frequencies rippled through his consciousness. Mason felt his mind stretch, pulled into the latticework of the Vanari neural net. It was a place of cold order and ruthless precision, threads of thought zipping past him like comets. Awe flooded him. This is how the Vanari thought, together in a massive humming unity, each mind a node, each node perfectly synchronized. But as he dove deeper, the perfection began to crack. Black tendrils snaked through the lattice, virulent distortions. They pulsed like angry tumors, infecting the clean geometry with chaotic patterns. He pushed forward. Mason's presence was foreign,
human. The system reacted, accepting and rejecting him in a paradoxical swirl. He felt his mind expanding and fraying all at once. Connection stabilized. Ulysses' voice echoed in his ear, but Mason knew it was temporary. The virus was here. It knew he was here. And it was waiting. Without warning, a spike of static pierced Mason's mind. His vision fractured. The lattice screamed. Red pulses of corruption surged toward him like tidal waves. He tried to anchor himself, tried to reroute the signals, but the virus was fast, smart. It learned from his moves in real time. Override initiated, came a cold synthetic whisper, except it wasn't from the rig. It was the virus, and it was talking directly into his thoughts. Mason gritted his teeth. Not today. Pain lanced through his skull. He saw flashes, his childhood, a battlefield, Ulysses' face. It was scrambling his memories, searching for weaknesses. The virus's intelligence wasn't just malevolent, it was intimate. It wasn't destroying the neural net, it was remaking it in its image. Mason fought to retain control. He redirected pathways, encoded false patterns, anything to delay it. But it was like fighting a hydra. Cut one connection and two more corrupted ones emerged. His heart thundered. His breath was shallow. For the first time, he realized this thing could kill him, not just physically, but mentally. Erase who he was. He had minutes, maybe less. Ulysses saw Mason convulse in the chair, his body jerking as if struck by lightning. The neural display crackled wildly, warnings flashing in every language. She hesitated, only for a breath. Then she moved. Without consulting the others, without protocol, she grabbed the secondary rig and jacked in. Pain hit her instantly, but different than Mason's. For her, this was home. Yet the virus made it a nightmare. She found Mason's signal, flickering, drowning. She linked to him, binding her consciousness to his. What are you doing? Mason's thought echoed, surprised and strained. What you cannot do alone, she answered. Their minds brushed, chaotic and cold. She felt his fear. He felt her logic. For a moment, it balanced. The neural nets surged, then stabilized. Together, they began to reconfigure the interface. She provided the structure, he brought the unpredictability. A dance of thoughts and instinct. It was the first time in Venari history a human and Venari had joined minds. And it was working. As Mason and Elise dug deeper into the corrupted nodes, a pattern emerged. It wasn't random. The virus had evolved. It didn't just infect, it observed. It mimicked Venari logic pathways, imitating their exact thought patterns. That's why it spread so fast. It fit in. Elise gasped, her thoughts trembling. It's using our strengths against us. Mason's mind raced. It's hiding in plain sight. It's not attacking directly, it's replacing. He saw clusters where the virus had built logic trees, more efficient than the original Venari code. It was better. It had adapted not to destroy Venari logic, but to become it. A dark thought hit him. What if it was learning them? Their fears, their routines, their society's weaknesses, emotional suppression, reliance on logic, uniformity. This isn't a virus, Mason said slowly. It's a reflection. It's what you become if you stop questioning. And now it was spreading like faith. Mason leaned into the paradox. He remembered moments of human chaos, grief, anger, love, emotions that made no sense but moved mountains. The Venari saw them as flaws, but the virus, it couldn't adapt to unpredictability. We beat it by being human. He shared his plan with Elise, an empathic disruptor, a signal coded not in logic, but in emotional variance.
fluctuations too wild for the virus to replicate. "You want to fight fire with madness," Elise said, uncertain. "No," he replied, eyes burning. "I want to fight control with freedom." The rig ground under the strain. He began encoding the counter signal. Emotional echoes from his past, his mother's laughter, the agony of loss, the thrill of a first kiss. It was messy, it was beautiful, and it was human. Mason's hands trembled as he finalized the disruptor. Elise stabilized the data stream. Together, they activated the transmission. The neural net pulsed. The virus reacted instantly, lashing out, trying to suppress the signal. But the disruptor wasn't a clean algorithm. It was chaos incarnate. It confused the virus, made it loop, crash, fracture. "Keep it steady!" Mason shouted, blood trickling from his nose. Elise poured everything into the stream. Her mind flickered. She saw human memories, not her own. She felt them. Love, loss, sacrifice. The virus began to crumble, but so did Mason. His heartbeat faltered. Neural overload. His mind, too open, was consuming itself. Still, he held on, long enough to finish the transmission. Then everything went white. Mason's body convulsed once more, then fell still. Alarms screamed. Elise yanked the interface cables from both of them. She collapsed beside him, gasping, eyes wide. He wasn't breathing. She placed a trembling hand to his chest. Nothing. Medical teams rushed in, but Elise stood over him, silent. He had done it. The virus was breaking apart, nodes going dark. Colonies flickered with light, then silence. But Mason was gone. To save a species not his own. The world was quiet. Venari cities, once echoing with hums of logic, now stood still. No virus, no connection, no clarity. Just silence. Elise sat beside Mason's body, surrounded by stillness. She didn't cry. Venari didn't. But her chest ached in a way she couldn't explain. He had changed everything. A single human, with wild thoughts and reckless courage, had saved them all. Venari leaders gathered. They offered words, honors. None of it mattered. Elise looked at the stars. "You brought us emotion," she whispered, "and paid for it with your life." But even as she mourned, she knew this was not the end. Something had awakened in the Venari, and Mason had lit the spark. A dull hiss, a flicker of light. Mason's eyes blinked open, the sterile white of the recovery pod glaring against his strained vision. His breath came shallow, mechanical, as if his body had forgotten how to breathe on its own. Every joint ached, every limb felt like lead. Yet, he was alive. Silence pressed around him, broken only by the soft hum of machines. His mind struggled to remember. Blasts of fire, cries of war, the hatchery, the children. Then darkness. Now light. He shifted, barely. Needles withdrew from his arms, the nutrient fluid drained away. His chest burned with effort, but the pain confirmed his reality. The chaos he had thrown himself into hadn't claimed him. Not completely. A thin panel in the pod hissed open. Artificial lights painted long shadows across a sleek metallic chamber. The walls were adorned with alien inscriptions, Venari design, sterile yet elegant. His head rolled to one side, catching the reflection of himself in the curved glass. Pale, sunken, scarred, but breathing.
Days had passed, maybe more. He could feel time etched into his bones. Every hour of unconsciousness had left a toll, yet also brought survival. He had crossed the line few came back from. His fingers twitched, his heart beat. Fragile hope bloomed in the stillness. He wasn't supposed to make it, but Mason had. She stood there, still as stone, silent as memory. Elise, the Venari warrior, once so cold in her judgment, had not moved from his side since the pod sealed, not once. In the days that followed the chaos, she had rejected aid, denied comfort, and instead chosen to stay, guarding a human she once deemed reckless, maybe even dangerous. Her posture was calm now, yet in her stillness lay a storm of thought. Her eyes, silver and sharp, watched every twitch in Mason's fingers, every flicker of his breath. She noted the subtle rise of his chest and dared to feel something alien to her, relief. No words crossed her lips, not yet, but her presence said more than words ever could. She remembered his cries as he pulled Venari younglings from collapsing halls, the raw fury in his movements, the way he defied every command for them, for children not his own. In that silence, something within her shifted. What once was distrust had transformed into something deeper, respect, even reverence. She did not speak, but her vigil was loud in meaning. She had chosen to believe in the one she once doubted. Mason stirred, and though he didn't speak either, his eyes met hers. The space between them didn't need to be filled. The bond had already formed. The silence lingered, heavy and intimate, until Elise moved. Slowly, with ceremonial grace, she stepped forward and extended her hand. To the unknowing eye, it seemed simple, a gesture of aid. But to the Venari, it was sacred. The open hand, palm upward, was a symbol of deep cultural trust, a warrior's surrender, an offer of alliance, a bridge between hearts. Mason's gaze flicked between her hand and her face. He could see the tension in her jaw, the vulnerability behind her stern expression. This wasn't easy for her. She was choosing to honor something beyond politics, something personal. His hand, trembling from exhaustion, rose to meet hers, skin to scale. Warmth passed between them, soft and staggering. Elise didn't flinch. "I don't offer this lightly," she said quietly, "but you've earned it." Mason didn't speak. He just held her hand tighter, letting the weight of the moment settle. For a heartbeat, the war vanished. The blood, the betrayals, the fear, they faded. What remained was understanding, trust, the kind that had to be built with pain. A new era had begun.
The Venari Council Chamber, vast and shimmering with crystalline arches, had never been so silent. Mason stood, still unsteady but upright, at the center of it all. Around him loomed the figures of Venari leaders, their ornate robes sweeping the floor, their eyes fixed on the human who had once been labeled a threat. Elise stood beside him, her presence steadying. Her earlier gesture had not gone unnoticed. Now, it demanded consequence. High Chancellor Bekoth, aged and scarred by war, stepped forward. There are few moments when a people must face their error. Today is such a moment. He turned to Mason. "You acted when we hesitated. You risked your life to save ours. We once saw your kind as primitive, dangerous. We were wrong." Gasps rippled through the chamber. The weight of those words echoed like a bell. "Let this be known," Bekoth declared. "Humanity is not beneath us. They are beside us. This one, Mason Creed, stands not as outsider, but as hero." Mason didn't smile. He didn't need to. The nod he gave was quiet, solemn. The acknowledgement wasn't about glory, it was about truth, finally spoken. Later, in a council subchamber glowing with soft blue light, Elise addressed both species. Her voice was strong, confident, and for the first time, hopeful. "We nearly lost everything, not because we were weak, but because we were divided." She turned to Mason. "This human showed us a path beyond war, a path we must choose." She extended a holopad. "I propose the formation of a joint alliance, human and Venari, to study the viral threats, to prepare for the unknown, and to protect both our peoples. The room buzzed with murmurs, some skeptical, others inspired. I will serve as the first liaison. I offer my name, my honor, and my life to this union. The gesture was radical, a Venari warrior submitting to a bond with humanity, unheard of. Mason stepped forward, placing his hand over hers. We accept. Together, we're stronger. A new chapter opened, one built on sacrifice, truth, and trust. The hatchery glowed with soft amber light. Rows of incubating pods hummed gently as small, curious eyes peeked through crystal windows. Mason walked slowly, each step echoing through the chamber. The scent of antiseptic mixed with warmth and life. Beside him, Elise watched the younglings he had saved, alive, thriving, playful. One Venari child clung to the edge of a pod, staring wide-eyed at Mason. He crouched and extended his hand. The child mirrored him, tiny claws brushing against his scarred skin. Elise knelt beside him. They remember, not in mind, but in spirit. Mason swallowed. They were just children. I couldn't leave them. Many would have, even some of us. The hatchery was more than a nursery now. It was a monument to survival, to the choices that had shaped a future neither species expected to share. In their eyes, Mason saw something he hadn't felt in a long time: peace. Outside the hatchery, beneath an alien sky, Elise walked beside Mason in silence. The stars above shimmered like truths not yet spoken. Finally, she asked, "You saved them, even when we ordered retreats, even when it cost you everything. Why?" Her voice wasn't accusing, it was searching. Mason didn't answer right away. He looked up at the stars, then down at his hands still marked by flame and effort. "I couldn't ignore it," he said softly. "They were innocent. Someone had to do something." Elise tilted her head. "But you are not one of us. Why care?" He turned to her. "Because I am human. Because someone has to care even when they're not wanted," Mason said. The wind whispered across the field, carrying his words into the night. Elise stared at him, not just as a warrior or liaison, but as something deeper, as someone trying to understand. That's what makes you dangerous. Not your weapons, your heart. Mason gave a tired smile. Maybe, but it's also what keeps us alive. They stood together, looking toward a new dawn. A dawn forged not in power, but in compassion. And for the first time in generations, the stars above looked just a little closer. The city of Virulon shimmered under the twin suns of Venari Prime. Its crystalline towers reached into the skies, some built by human hands, others with Venari biotech, each a tribute to two species learning not just to coexist, but to thrive together. In the center of the Harmony sector stood the Rourke-Elise Institute, named after the unlikely pair whose decisions reshaped history. What had once been suspicion and silence between Earth and Venari had become a vibrant hum of cooperation. Laboratories bustled with mixed teams, humans in adaptive suits and Venari in flowing neural robes, working side by side to cure diseases once thought incurable and develop technologies neither species could have imagined alone. New screens glowed with images of joint missions, spaceports ferrying both species to distant moons, and children, human and Venari, playing under the same sky. It all began with a moment, a single decision, a human named Mason who dared to trust and act when no one else would. The world hadn't been the same since. The lecture hall had emptied, leaving behind the soft buzz of lights and the scent of metal and ozone. Elise, now older and decorated with the ceremonial stripes of Unity scholars, sat quietly, organizing her notes on a hollow slab.
A small voice broke the silence. Teacher Elise. She turned to see a Veneri child, scale still soft, eyes wide with shimmering curiosity.
Yes, little one? The child tilted their head. Why do you work with humans? It was a simple question, naive, innocent, but it struck Elise like a ripple on still water. In that child's voice was a galaxy's worth of history, unspoken but ever present. Elise's eyes softened. She set the hollow slab down and leaned forward, speaking not as a scholar, but as someone who had lived the answer. Because I didn't trust them, she said quietly. Not at first. Not until one of them did something no Venari ever had. The child blinked, puzzled. He risked everything, Elise continued, for people he didn't know, for us, even when we didn't ask, even when we pushed them away. She paused, her voice now carrying the weight of memory. It wasn't logic, it wasn't strategy, it was just courage. The kind that doesn't ask if it's safe or smart, it just is. The child listened, wide-eyed. And that, Elise said gently, is when I knew humans were different. That night, Elise stood on the upper terrace of the Institute, wrapped in silence. The stars above were clearer here. Venari skies held no pollution, no interference, just truth. Her gaze drifted toward a small cluster of lights near the edge of known space. One of them, barely visible, was Earth. So far, so close. She remembered the first transmission from the humans after the war. Static and shaky, but filled with something alien and powerful. Hope. Now, that same hope echoed in the stars. Elise breathed in slowly. The air felt lighter these days, not just from science, but from trust. The stars above no longer symbolized separation. They represented potential, a future unbound by fear. The child's question lingered in Elise's mind long after the day ended. In her quarters, she sat before an old artifact, a shard of the datapad Mason had once carried, burned and broken, yet preserved. A relic of a man who'd done something no computer could calculate, no algorithm could justify. She whispered to no one in particular. I never asked him why he did it. I don't think even he knew. A soft breeze brushed through the open window, carrying with it the sense of the Venari gardens, once forbidden to outsiders, now open to all. Elise stood, speaking the words she would pass down in every class, in every speech, until her final day. Sometimes, trust begins with a single act no logic can explain.
And that act, illogical, reckless, deeply human, had rewritten the stars.